Hello, you're tuned into the Crystal Concentric Consciousness live call-in show, hosted by Trudy Radio's own Pete Cosmoon and the Crystal Concentric's founder, Kyle Russell. You can call in at 712-775-7035 with the code 563349. There's no charge, simply dial in with your questions. We start with a topic and then we open up to the callers. So this is what if you've never read a single book on crystals, but still knew how to understand the language of crystals? Crystal Concentric founder Kyle Russell shows you how. That's what he did 30 years ago when a massive spiritual download of information gave him the foundation of knowledge, which he's since honed through his practice with individual clients and is leading webinars, workshops, and meditations. So you can either call into the show at 712-775-7035 with the code 563349, or you go to trudyradio.com and go to the live link, find numerous other ways to connect with the call, or you go to trudyradio.com and go to the chat link and type in your question right there. Kyle, how are you doing tonight?
I am doing great, thank you, Pete. It's wonderful to be on the line and on the radio again together.
Yes. We always have so many fun things to talk about, don't we? It seems like we get right up to the very end of the hour and it's time to go.
Exactly. And today was particularly interesting because even though I have a very spicy show lined up for next time, I thought we could touch on some very interesting topics this time, and I'm inspired by some current events and some things that you and I have been talking about since last month.
Mm-hmm.
So, I posted something on Facebook in the last minute promotion to let people know about the call, and I asked the question, are these the end times?
Oh.
It was very dramatic, and I also said, what's up with the Pope? Because, later listeners will remember that today was the day that the Pope spoke to the joint chambers of Congress, and it was a bit of a historic day since no previous Pope has done that.
I have to admit I don't watch the news.
I do listen to NPR, and I don't own a television set, so fortunately I'm not inundated with most of what most people see most of the time. And that's a blessing, to be sure. It's wonderful to be free of news reports because sometimes the news reports can be very disturbing. In fact, most times they're very disturbing.
Right.
So, when we were talking earlier this month, you were saying that a lot of people are feeling a lot of energy right now, and there's a sense that, something is happening. We've got these blood moons, we've got an eclipse happening, there seems to be astrological stuff going on in spades, and people are sort of a little on edge because of all of that excitement that seems to be happening around us.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's what I keep hearing from people. People either seem to be like kind of in a stuck space, or they seem to be really kind of moving forward fast.
Right. And I am in that feeling of moving forward fast, which is kind of exciting. It feels like things are falling into place, and I'm having just enough time to do the key things that I have to do in order to keep the whole machinery going. So I'm lucky that way, but I think part of our topic for tonight is how does it all fit together? What's the deal with the vortex? What's the deal with luck and good fortune? And all of that seems very topical for right now at this moment. So I don't know, are there any other sort of questions or perspectives that you either have or have been hearing from people that you think tap into this whole theme?
No, I think definitely. I think this is a time of change, and so I think people are looking for something that they can use to help them, really kind of get a more of a, an even keel rhythm.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
It does. Getting an even keel rhythm is very important. I think of it also as kind of like finding your inner compass. where the seas may be shifting, but north is still north and east is east and west is west. And if you can just get your bearings and just stay the course, you can be moving in the right direction. And that is about as much as any of us can really hope to be doing, since, getting distracted and getting waylaid and getting thrown off to the side is really what happens when you aren't connected to that inner compass, and when you're subject to the types of vagaries and shifts that are happening all the time. You find yourself kind of waylaid and a bit lost and uncertain about where to go and how to proceed.
Do you feel like crystals, kind of like I do, that they really kind of suck up energy or take energy in for you?
There are a few crystals that do take in energy and transmute them. Smoky quartz is the number one for that. But mostly I consider crystals to be little microcosms of some grander natural energy. So, for example, jade. Jade is very sort of water and earth combined energetically. It's very soothing and it's very flowing. And that type of natural energy can be helpful to a person who's feeling a little destabilized. And there's a number of different stones, all the grounding stones. I think we should definitely do an interview about grounding specifically, because there's a lot to say there.
Right.
But one thing I did want to touch on is this whole idea that from the question that I had originally put out there, which was, are these the end times? And yeah, there's a couple of things that made me think of that. One of them was I went by I drove by a poster that was on like a street sign, and it said something like, the end of the world is coming on September 29th. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's really soon. But then I looked at I looked down on the poster because it seemed a little, weather worn for being, so immediate. And the year was 2011.
Oh my gosh.
So
that's crazy.
So that got me thinking and saying, well, you know what? A lot of people have been saying that it's the end time for a very, very long time. Going back to the year 1000, when people thought for sure, or even 2000 in our lifetime, the whole millennium, people were all freaked out about that. But the thing is that I believe nature does not particularly care about our calendars. It does have rhythms, and the stars do come and go, and you've got your Mercury in retrograde, and all kinds of astrological things do happen with some frequency and some predictability. But nature is going to do what nature does. And what's our calendar, whether it's the Mayan calendar or the modern calendar, we might try to approximate certain things, but ultimately it's important to remember that the forces of nature are much bigger than we are, and they don't really subscribe to our timetables. So that's a perspective that I have. So given that poster, and a lot of people are thinking, this is it, this is the time. I think that there have been arguments for that, all along. There have been times of great breakthrough and times of great turmoil. World War II, for example, was a period of time of inexplicable, global proportioned disaster. And, we survived that somehow. There have been earthquakes. There have been, mass extinctions from millions and millions of years ago, way, way before even the dinosaurs. experienced their extinction. There were even bigger extinctions than that happened due to climate change, extreme climate change, and astral events and global events that have been, the moon apparently was a collision with the Earth, and it pulled out a chunk of the Earth and then went and settled up in our orbit, but had not always been there. So, when you think in the big scheme of things, a lot of our smaller concerns tend to be dwarfed. And so I think our best bet is to, there are certainly signs. We look back at times, I don't know about you, Pete, but in my childhood, we were constantly aware of potential nuclear war. And most people nowadays are not really that, they don't really remember what that was like to live under that shadow. And they also don't actually know how devastating and Armageddon-like nuclear weapons are. And fortunately, or hopefully, fortunately up till now, and hopefully going forward, we will not in our lifetimes experience what that is. But that, that and the melting of the ice caps and the rising sea levels and the erratic weather patterns, those are the types of things that I think are our tangible indicators that we as a human race are making things worse. And we as a human race need to start taking responsibility for making things better in order to avoid spiraling into, greater chaos as we approach 20 billion people on the planet. So that's my little exposition on where I think the state of the world is. I think Pope's visit is particularly topical, and I know that a lot of people like to demonize the Pope or the Catholic Church, and they think, they think only of the abuses of the Church, but they don't realize that the Church, as complicated as it is, sort of held Europe together through the Dark Ages, and also as Protestantism came into play, there were a lot of important developments that happened through the Church, and this Pope, more than certainly recent ones, seems to have his finger on the pulse of modern times and not be existing in a total vacuum out in Vatican City without any context with the world. So him actually coming out and visiting and even being amongst the Congress of the U.S., which I learned is apparently more religious, at least on paper, than the rest of the population, I think is noteworthy. So when people, and also another little detail I wanted to add in there, and then I think I will have covered my rant, is that Bernie Sanders' appearance is also quite inspiring because he's a populist, and up until now, the populist banner, more recently, has been borne by conservatives who feel like they're tapping into, what the people really feel and the little guy's needs, etc. And Bernie Sanders seems to be taking a genuine, non-hypocritical perspective about caring for people. And I think between him and the Pope doing the same, we have some examples of modern day sort of heroic figures. I won't say on the scale or try to make comparisons, but I will draw parallels with John F. Kennedy or Martin Luther King or some of these people who individually made a big difference in the way that people thought and the way that consciousness developed on the planet. So hopefully that type of leadership will get people thinking and taking some steps that are more positive in order to take control and take back control over our own human-induced Armageddon and sort of end times lifestyle. So, what do you think of them apples, Pete?
I like it. My question would really be, so how does, I imagine probably amber is, but what effects do environmental or social pressures have on crystals, or what kind of force can they or effect can they have on that? Do you know what I mean?
Well, let me see how I can interpret that question in a way that will be helpful. Because for me, I think that a lot of people, most of the religions and most of the healing modalities, including angels, and I spent a lot of time with angel people this last weekend at a workshop, and because you just got in the mail a very interesting deck of cards all about the angels.
Yes, thank you, my friend.
Surely, my pleasure. But people have paradigms, and they have ways of thinking about the universe and reality, and where we fit into the whole cog of the machine. And I think that where I come down on working with crystals, and the reason why I think they're so useful, is that they embody, each one of them is a packaged force of nature that enables us to bring the forces of nature into our consciousness and then into our personal meditation or healing practice, so that we can actually weather the storm and stay the course. And I had said that before, and I want to actually bring up an interesting type of stone called a lingam stone. I don't know, are you familiar with that one, Pete?
I've never heard of it.
Oh, well, now's your chance. So the lingam stone is a very interesting stone. It comes from India, and it is shaped kind of like an almond. It sort of comes to points, gets fat in the middle, and then it comes to points on the side. And it's sort of, I was talking to someone about 3 key round shapes in crystals, and one of them was the sphere. It's perfectly round in all directions, so that's omnidirectional. And then there's the egg, and the egg is like a ball, but it's tending towards manifestation on the other side, where it sort of comes to a point, whereas the lingam stone comes to a point on both ends. And it is found in India originally. There's a certain river, and these stones were perfectly tumbled into this perfect shape, kind of like a football, sort of. And in that shape, they would be taken right out of the water, and they represent, they're called Shiva lingams. So they're actually some sort of a cryptophallic symbol, and it's placed on top of the female version, which is a little bit like a sort of curving fountain, and it stands, so the lingam stands in the base, and then they pour libations and water and oil and stuff on top. So so some people feel like it's a very sort of male-oriented energy on this lingam stone, but in point of fact, in my experience, because I always use my crystal concentrics understanding of the language of crystals to come to my own conclusions about any given stone that I'm come across, the lingam stone represents a kind of an equilibrium. And the other stone that does that is a double terminated quartz usually. There are some other double terminated stones. Black tourmaline double terminates, apatite double terminates. Rarely you'll get a calcite that double terminates. And so in that double termination, we have a kind of a balance. And I think of it more horizontal rather than vertical. And that horizontal balance helps us to get equilibrium and stability and stasis in our approach. The octahedron, which is another big favorite of mine, and the pyramid, of course. The pyramid is basically 4 corners or 3 corners on the base, and then it comes up in a triangle to a point. And an octahedron goes up to a point and then goes down the opposite direction to a point. And the octahedron represents the balance of up and down. You see that symbol in the Star of David, and you also see it in the cross. The cross is a balancing of vertical and horizontal energies. If you can see it as a symbol beyond its use as a tool of crucifixion. And a lot of the different religions, including the yin and yang that you'll find out in Korea, use this balancing of opposites to make sense of the world, and sort of to experience balance in a world where there doesn't seem to be any balance. So that's a way that I can go from these abstract expoundings about world events and whether we're facing Armageddon or not, Revelation, whatnot, and to say, what, we don't know. We can't know what the future holds. Nature's going to do what nature does. God is going to do what God does. And as much as we can try to be in tune with that, our best bet is to control what we can control, which is ourselves in large part, and our culture and society to a larger, in a bigger, broader sort of circular, inclusive sense.
Wow. Yeah.
That's a lot of stuff, I know. But that's what
so
happens
true.
when I get on the phone with you. It's like I start to make these connections, and my own sort of revelations come up about how to make sense of these different things.
I love it. I know for me personally, I know something. I do want to remind everybody this is a live call-in show, and you can dial in 712-775-7035. with the code 563349. You can also connect at trueyourradio.com at the live link. There's numerous other ways to connect with the call. Or go to trueyourradio.com and actually type in your question right there at the chat link. And for anybody that's in the call-in queue right now, if you'd like to raise your hand and ask a question, you can dial in *6 at any time. So what I really want to ask about, I know for me personally, I think I've had a lot of people ask about this as well, is people are having a lot of trouble with electronics lately. And what's your suggestion with that?
Well, tell me a little bit more about the trouble that they're having.
I know computers can be the bane of my existence a lot of times, and it seems like, and just the different very complex computing devices that we have nowadays, even down to our phones, that type of thing. And I have a lot of people that I know personally that as their energy raises, they seem to have more and more conflicts with the more complex technologies.
I can understand that. I had a problem actually recently. I had a PC desktop that crapped out, and I was looking to replace it, and I was thinking, do I get another Mac laptop? And then I realized that it's possible to get a screen and to get a 2-screen situation going just from my laptop. And so the reason I tell that story is that we are overwhelmed by too much electronics. That's for sure. And we were talking earlier about being overwhelmed by the news. Now, the news and the electronics are all part of this artificial electromagnetic environment that we are exposing ourselves to, that we are bringing into our lives, that we're embracing every second of the day. And my advice on just in general how to deal with it is to put the electronics down, to step away from them, and to really recognize that there is, the real world is really here, and it's not the internet. The internet is indeed its own world, but people need to do a little less conflating and a little more separating out, just put things into context, so that they don't feel so wigged out. For example, if your GPS craps out and you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get anywhere? Well, there were maps, and you can ask people, and there are other solutions and ways around it. So you can either use technology to create workarounds your issues, or you can avoid technology. But one way or another, you have to maintain some sort of sense of perspective. And you can also use the stones, which are natural energies, to sort of get back to nature, get back to natural sensation. Close your phone, close your computer, sit and meditate, introduce a crystal into your meditation, and depending on the crystal's energy, either what you feel from it automatically when you're working with it, or if you either have studied or are willing to learn more about the language of crystals, you can, I won't, manipulate is a bad word, but you can help shape and direct your experience by using the stones to shepherd yourself in the right direction. There's no crystal that I know of that will necessarily make a computer work better. Certainly, they do use quartz and other natural materials to, help calibrate their timing. But if there's a stone that you feel makes you work better, you may want to put that on your computer or near your computer in order to align your expectations of what you want to have to happen with the electronics with the electronics perspective of what it wants to do. So it's just, whether you're talking about God or electronics or people or nature, I think all of it responds better if you get engaged in an activity of consciously seeking alignment. Alignment is a very, very key thing. And also, to quote evolution, mutation is also a key thing. So that's a kind of an interesting duality to really explore, is that we want constancy, but we also want progress. We want stability and we want movement. And, stability comes from the grounding stones, and movement can come from some of the focus and flow stones. Like, for example, hematite is an interesting material. It's a metallic, and it has elements of both grounding and flow simultaneously, which is a kind of a nice way to sort of blend energies. And there's other stones, mostly quartz points, particularly the laser points. A lot of people don't realize that not all quartz points are created equal. Most quartz points go up straight on the sides, and then they sort of come to a point like the Washington Monument. Whereas laser quartz points, they taper immediately from the base. So their entire body is tending towards the point. And as such, they're able to focus energies more easily and better than a run-of-the-mill quartz point. So, and then there's also clarity. People are seeking more clarity. And, just like you want the latest operating system, you want to have the best operating functionality for your brain. And I think that clear quartz is a helpful tool for getting clarity. And in that case, it doesn't really matter if it has a point, or if it's just a broken piece, or if it's a generator, or if it's just a very clear piece, or even sometimes if it's a foggy piece. If it's a foggy piece, it takes it into another direction. But the clarity in quartz is a really helpful way for you to try to separate out the irrelevant and begin to focus more on what really, really matters. And we as a human race have a need to be doing that as well, because as the population rises and pollution increases and the water levels change, we're going to have to really keep our wits about problem solving. So really the solutions that we find for ourselves are going to be helpful for the planet as well.
Mm. And I love that you brought up hematite. I actually have a hematite bracelet that I wear, because I have my left wrist tends to be the one that has the, feels the weakest, and so I keep it on there and I have no problems. Can you speak to that any, or?
Well, let me ask you a question. Tell me a little bit more about left versus right for you. Are you right-handed?
I'm right-handed. I've always kind of felt that the left side is more the heart side and the right side is more the logic. Is that kind of what you mean, or?
Yep, yeah. I do believe that also, and so I would, just as a sort of an aside, I'm curious if you could tell me more why the left side, because you seem like you're pretty in touch with your feelings. Why would the left side feel weaker to you?
Oh, we just got deep. This just happened. I was not expecting this question. That's interesting. Probably because I have a tendency, as most light workers do, of pouring out heart so much that I don't keep enough for myself. That's just what I'm getting. As soon as you ask that question, that's what comes up for me. Wow, that kind of hurt a little bit.
Sorry, no intention to make you put you on the spot there. But what's interesting though, I think, is when you think about a bracelet, is it all hematite all around?
Yes.
Right. So wearing a bracelet like that is kind of like wearing a little asteroid belt around your wrist. So what the way I think of it is that if you're feeling that is like your Achilles tendon, where there's like a point of it's not always, sometimes we think of weakness, but a weakness can also be a chink in the armor. It can be the sort of that place in when there were knights and they were wearing armor top to bottom, there was that point, like especially at the joints of their body, where one plate of armor ended and then the other plate of armor for their legs, say, started. And they could be at risk of being pierced in that little in-between space. So that in-between space is a little bit like where you're feeling that energy in your wrist, where there's like a thinness in the veil. There's a sort of shallowness to the aura. So sometimes our aura can be built up and be very strong and very thick and calloused. And sometimes our aura in certain places can be very, very fine and thin. So when you put your little hematite asteroid belt around that weak spot, what you're doing is you're bringing a new type of gravity to that area, a new type of flow that is strengthening and reinforcing, so that you don't feel like that door is like wide open. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I kind of got chills a little bit as you were saying that. So it absolutely does.
That's cool. So, I mean, it's nice that you found that, and that it found the right place on you to give you that sense of sort of protection and shielding. And actually, there's another stone that is pertinent to that. I'm looking through my crystal cards. I'm actually going to be printing my deck of 52 crystal cards. It's going to come out in November of this year, 2015. So I'm pretty excited about that. And one of the stones that is featured on it is, of course, the Herkimer diamond. Are you familiar with those, Pete?
We've talked about them a few times, and they're quite beautiful.
It keeps coming back. The Herkimer diamond is a real strength and health and strength stone. And so at this point where people are, I think that because of our theme tonight, people who are looking for more equilibrium, people who are looking for more stability, strength, grounding, those are the types of stones that I'm drawn to help you approach and use and bring into your life. I'm not going to be talking about super duper astral journeying stones, when I think that if people are feeling insecure on some basic level about where things are at or where they're going, it would really help them to have some sort of a foundation to build on and to jump off of, rather than feeling like they're up in the clouds and they're not able to get their bearings for that reason.
Wow. Yeah, I think I need to get some of those in. For sure.
Definitely. And I'm wondering, I hope we're not holding off anybody who wants to ask any questions. I know sometimes people are listening and they're very shy. I don't know if this is one of those nights.
We have some shy ones tonight. I do want to remind everybody we are on a live call-in show. Number is 712-775-7035 with the code 563349. You can also come to us live from the truetoyouradio.com site. Go to the live link. There's other ways to connect with us, or go to the chat link and actually just type your question in there. Anybody that's in the queue, if you'd like to ask a question, if you'll just dial in *6 to raise your hand, we'd be more than happy to bring you on. That way, people stay silent for just a little while. And I guess it's I don't know that we've really ever talked about one of my favorite stones and really kind of what you feel about that. Can I ask you about that?
Absolutely.
So one of my favorite stones is the emerald, and I often feel as though it's a very healing stone. I have a very large emerald that's not of any kind of jewelry shape or whatever you'd call it. It's just a beautiful stone to me. What's your feeling about the emerald?
I really like emeralds. I do think that they're an advanced stone. They're not a very accessible stone. There are other green stones that are a little simpler, and for people who are drawn to emerald, I would say that they're actually tuning into a higher level than most other people who are not noticing the emerald. For example, aventurine, which is green quartz, it's relatively common. You can definitely find it around. Even malachite is a green stone, but malachite is certainly a heart stone, and emerald is a heart stone also. But in my heart chakra system, the emerald doesn't feature because it's not one of the top 6. But I think what the emerald is doing is it's tapping into some deeper levels of heart energy that most people, like, for example, I consider the main heart energies of forgiveness and compassion, emotional expression, those types of aspects. And we can obviously have a call just about that, maybe right around Valentine's. That would make sense. But emerald, I personally love emerald. Emerald is one of the first stones that I bought 20 years ago. I have a really nice little natural cluster of it, and that gave me some very, very powerful vibes, which I unfortunately damaged when I cleansed it. I made the mistake of cleansing it because everybody tells you that you should, and that sort of changed my whole philosophy on cleaning stones, because I think a lot of their energy is cumulative, and if you zap them through cleansing, you end up with less than you started with. And what I started with emerald was a very sort of multidimensional. It was like a mansion with many rooms. So I would recommend, if you have already, I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. But if you haven't, I would recommend you meditating on it, considering its role in your heart configuration, and what sort of additions or contributions or support or gateways it provides you. Do you have any particular insight as to how it strikes you?
I know that this particular stone, his name is Alfred, has helped me through some times when my heart's been kind of hurting, or if I've had a headache, or if I have a sore spot. I'll feel the natural inclination just to hold him in my left palm, in the very center of my left palm, in that space, and he warms up very quickly, and it just seems to kind of move the energy through and kind of dissipate, whatever it is I'm going through. I feel very comforted. I feel very not alone. I feel almost like there's a presence there with me. So it's more than just a stone to me. It's like and it's more even than just a friend. It's almost like a little warm, loving, like fairy godfather or something like that. I'm not really sure how to even really say it. It's like this little being. It just is like there for me whenever I want to. And I've had when I do readings for clients, I have a particular client that every now and then the stone will say, she needs to hold me. And I would give it to her, and she would feel exactly the same thing. So I ended up getting like a Alfred Jr. and had them kind of sit together for a while. And then I was intuited to give her the smaller of the stones, and she's absolutely getting that same energy from the small one. It's almost as though it was transferred just a little bit. So that's been my experience.
Well, the words that the hit that I got when you were searching for names for it was helper or partner. And that's a really interesting thing, and I actually really like that. Part of what's great about this exploration of crystal concentric consciousness is that you learn things along the way, and you're able to interpret and incorporate other people's experience. And to me, what I'm feeling is that the emerald represents not so much spiritual guides or partners, but sort of very personal, like come right down into your hand and be there with you. And it's interesting that you held it in the left hand, which is where you have that emotional side, and where if your heart is hurting or strained for whatever reason, you're able to sort of regroup and re-up the energy that's there by having this helper or partner present. So I really appreciate your experience of the emerald, and it's going to definitely change how I think about it too.
Good. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, he's a special guy to me.
Well, you'll have to post his photo up on Facebook so people can see it.
Well, it's interesting, and I'm going to get, of course, I was about to say I'm going to get a little woo-hoo, but this show's a little bit woo-hoo anyway. I deal with, the angels, and I deal with angel cards, and I have a box that I have. It's a very beautiful box, and it's filled with my cards, and it's filled with gems, and the gems are, I'm going to say, I've always just been told they're in service to the cards. In other words, they cleanse the cards after reading, and they charge them. And Alfred is one of a collection of about 8 stones that's in service to the cards, and so I'm only able to take him out at particular times. Otherwise, he's there with the cards. And for any of those gems that are in there, if I'm ever intuited to let somebody hold them, they always remark about the energy. So I don't really know that I know what's happening in that little box over there. I don't really know that I need to know what's happening. But if he will allow me to take a picture of him, I will. I'm only allowed to handle him. So I've been without him in my palm for a little while. I do kind of miss him, but every now and then I'm allowed to hold him. I think it makes it more special at that point. So.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I did a session on somebody recently, and they brought a big milky candle quartz out, and that someone had given them as a gift. And I was like, I'm not psychic, and I usually don't go there in terms of picking up on stuff that is of this kind of variety. But I said, this stone has been through something. This stone is housing some unwanted energy, and this stone actually does need cleansing. And so he is like, wow, okay. And then by total coincidence, he forgot it when he split. And I was like, look, you forgot your stone. And he's like, oh, well, maybe it was meant to be, because then he gets to hang out with the museum of other stones that you have. And I'm like, yeah, well, you know what? Would you allow me to give it a little bit of a treatment? And he said, sure. So I ended up, I actually washed it with a soap and water, did, a water cleansing, and then, which I rarely do. And then I took it over and I rested it on one jade and had it leaning on another jade, because what I felt was it needed its energy soothed, balanced out, that whatever entities in there, if they couldn't be exercised, they should at least be pacified. And so I totally understand what you're talking about with reference to your magic box there, because what happens is when you have the right combination of stones and then you introduce something like a deck of cards, they sort of hang out together. And like you said, it's like the little birds that go land on the rhinoceros and help get rid of parasites, you know?
Right.
Exactly.
Or the little fish that follow the sharks around.
Exactly. Those are the type of sort of synergetic, symbiotic relationships that really work. And that's where you can find something like a card deck, which represents a very sort of human construct and system, being sort of playing nice with the natural energies of the crystals, to the benefit of everybody. Because like you say, people feel like, oh wow, these cards feel like they've really been well taken care of. So that's cool. It's always good to hear these stories and for you to share like your experience. And that's what happens when we talk to callers, is that they throw their experience in and then we dance around with it and have a little jig.
Yeah. And you had reminded me, I forgot, a yogi of mine had looked at that stone, and she said she could see a bunch of little Buddhas in it. And I thought that was really interesting.
I like that. And that sort of...
I do too.
Yeah, the bodhisattva, if you're familiar with the concept of a bodhisattva is basically a being who is so evolved that they could experience nirvana and eject themselves from the cycle of life and reincarnation. So they're very high beings, but what they do is they decide to turn back from that opportunity and re-enter the human sphere in order to help us. And that's something, that the angels could be seen as doing, or saints, or other sort of intercessors, fairies, all these different types of entities are seen as having compassion for us and showing a willingness to step back from the brink, or step back from total enlightenment and ejection from the life cycle, into the fray of helping us with our problems. And I think, to go back to the Pope, and I'm not Catholic, so I've no agenda here to, promote where he's coming from or where the Catholic Church is coming from, but he's someone who's using his power and his position to try to make things better. And it's doing his office honor, in a way that, I don't believe the last Pope did anything noteworthy at all as far as the rest of the world is concerned. So, hopefully our next president will be able to, we're right here at the beginning of a brutal election year. And so all of our, woo-woo spiritual efforts are going to be happening in the context of this very earthly struggle between belief systems and ideals and ways that people conceive of how the world should be. And this brings up one other point that I want to make, is that we talk about heaven and hell, or religiously, historically, those places have been talked about as some other sphere. But I believe that we live in heaven and hell right here, right here and now, every day. And that some people who are suffering are in hell, literally, and people who are happy are in heaven. And we sort of navigate and negotiate those different worlds quite easily. I remember my daughter, when she was a little baby, she could go from like completely bawling her eyes out to like smiling and laughing, like just like that. And it really taught me that, it's all in the perspective and where we find ourselves, whether we find ourselves in a state of pacification and acceptance. I mean, yesterday, actually, I hung out with my father, who is very old and who is quite certain that he's going to be moving over to the other side soon. And I also hung out with a newborn who's only 2 or 3 months old, and it was pretty interesting to see those two opposites in the same day, and realize that it's again, it's all about what you make of your situation and how you perceive it, whether you're living in hell or whether you're living in heaven or purgatory.
Right. Yeah, they're both the energies are so they're available for us to whatever we really decide to accept and really look at, isn't it?
Right, and embrace and pursue. And that's, again, to bring us back to the crystals, the crystals help us pursue those energies. They help us pursue health or vitality. They help clear the way with protection. They help detoxify. They help us cope with the unknown and the uncertain. They help us ground. They help us to forgive others or forgive ourselves, or gain the vitality that we need to sort of dig ourselves out of our hole. So there's a lot of very useful tools and energies that we have, right here in the mineral kingdom, that if we think about it and we use the language of crystals constructively, we're able to put those energies to use. Right now I'm actually tapping a pointed crystal into different parts of my chest and finding like some trouble zones that need a little energy working. So like even down to the physical level of using crystals as massage wands, they tend to break up blockages and help energy flow. And illness is often a blockage of energy. Cancer is a very good example of energy being stopped up and clogged up, and giving us an opportunity and calling out to us to try to get some flow going and let the energy out and let it move on to where else it may wish to go, without having to stay and ruin our lives. But at the same time, some people do get sick, and all of us die. So no amount of prayer or right livelihood or anything has yet prevented someone from physically dying, but lots of right action and lots of right behavior towards yourself and others can help leave a legacy that lives on, and also ameliorate the quality of our life while we have it. So that's a kind of a meditation right there, is to really sit with the possibilities of how you can, make your own world better and make the rest of the world better. And regardless of whether we're facing revelation or not, you can, achieve your own sense of salvation and direction in tumultuous times.
I love that. Well, we've got about 3 minutes left. You were talking about some cards that you're building. Is there anything coming up that you want to talk to us about before we go today?
Well, I don't know if I've mentioned the cards before. I'm really excited about them now because it's been a long process. We worked through getting the pictures right. We worked through getting the categories right and retaking pictures. And it's been a real artistic, creative process that's lasted over a year in the making. But the end result is a really great layout of my human energy stone system, which consists of foundation, heart, voice, and source. And those are all on my energy poster. But the fifth element is called channel. And it's not specifically associated with parts of the human body, but it's associated with the with crystals that either convey us to other places or cleanse us, or these types of crystals can be transmitters, or they can represent the aura. There's a lot of different things, and I'm realizing we could probably do a whole call on the cards themselves, which is going to be fun to have that out in the world, because next year is the year I'm going to write a book. So that's very exciting. And that's not even talking about the Angel Crystal project that we've been discussing behind the scenes.
Right. Yes, I'm very, very excited about that.
Yeah, I think there's some really, really good stuff in the wings that's going to happen in 2016. So, certainly for us, it's a time of change and transformation and development and growth.
Absolutely, yes, and I'm so amazed and so excited and so thrilled. So we have about a minute left. How can people contact you, Kyle?
Oh yes, absolutely. People should email Kyle, Kyle, at crystalconcentrics.com. That's Kyle at crystalconcentrics.com, and also be looking out for the totally revamped website and the membership program, which I have going to be unloading. Hopefully I'll have a good reason to celebrate Thanksgiving.
I love that. That's fantastic. Well, Kyle, I really appreciate you. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it. That's good.
Oh, okay. Well, I appreciate everybody tuning into the Crystal Concentric Consciousness show with Kyle Russell and your host here, Pete Casaboon. Thank you to the True to You Radio Network for making this possible, and we will say good evening.
Very well. Thanks a lot, Pete. We'll connect with everybody next time. And remember, we do have our previous podcasts available that you can tap into them right through True to You Radio.
All right. Thank you, Kyle. We'll talk to you soon.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Let's see. Make sure that we are. Okay. Oh, let me check that.
Hi.